listening to Season 7 of the podcast, Belonging to Blackness. I'm your host, Dr. India. Welcome back. I'm your host, Dr. India, and today we're closing out Season 7 with a conversation grounded in resilience, purpose, and the power of turning personal injustice into collective action. I am joined by Dakarai Larriett, entrepreneur, author, community leader, and current Democratic candidate running for U.S. Senate in the state of Alabama. His campaign is rooted in justice, reform, and a vision for a more equitable future for all Alabamans. In addition to his leadership across nonprofit boards and community initiatives in Birmingham, Dakarai is also the author of the book titled Don't Flush: From a False Arrest to a Political Awakening, My Journey to Making a Difference, which is a powerful reflection on that life-altering experience in 2024, which he transformed into a catalyst for advocacy, accountability, and change. On this episode, we're diving into Dakarai's journey, his roots, his work, his writing, his faith, and the experiences that shaped his path toward public service and political leadership. This is a conversation about belonging, courage, and what it means to not only navigate systems, but to challenge and change them. So welcome, Dakarai.
Oh, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Dr. India.
We're so looking forward to you sharing your journey with our listeners. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's get into it.
Give Black Alliance is proud to support the podcast Belonging to Blackness, hosted by India Lorick Wilmot. The podcast is an exploration of all aspects of our Black communities, including gifts of time, talent, and treasure, while shedding a positive light on the African descendant experience globally. The Give Black Alliance informs, reforms, and transforms philanthropy to acknowledge and partner with our communities in order to bring about equitable change for all. To learn more about Give Black Alliance, visit us at giveblackalliance.org.
Act 1, Call to Adventure. All right, Dakarai, so let's start at the beginning. How did your upbringing as the son of a military father and educator mother shape your understanding of discipline, service, and identity?
That's a great question. I think just valuing the structure of the home and that core family, expanding beyond there, valuing education, the possibilities that it could bring. That is really what I take away from my upbringing and my mom's advocacy for me. So how important it is to have a parent that knows what the good schools are and how to get their kids into them. That's something that mom did. And when she saw that we were in failed school systems, she got me into charter schools and magnet schools. And then with dad, it was that discipline. I even talk about it in my book, like how you show up in the world. Always dress your very best. And that doesn't mean that you're rich. It just means that you're always doing your best and presenting your best. So I learned so much from both of them.
You moved frequently, and I think your book also talks about this a little bit. So you lived in California, Washington, Oklahoma, and then even Germany. You were later educated at both the University of Alabama and then Howard University. So how did all of those experiences influence your sense of belonging and your perspective on being both Black and talking about and traversing LGBTQIA plus identities?
Yeah, it's a great question because University of Alabama has a very storied history with segregation. And you think about standing in the schoolhouse doorway, like I literally took classes in that building. That's how close it touches me. And I wanted to get an experience where I was not at a PWI and My parents actually met at Alabama State University, one of the many HBCUs in the state of Alabama. Fun side note, Alabama has the most of any state. So
Mm.
I wanted that experience for myself at some point, and I took the opportunity to do a study abroad program. And I spent a year in Washington, D.C., got to attend Howard, got to intern and see how the federal government works. And it was
Mm.
so transformative and powerful. I tell people about it all the time that they should consider HBCUs. I think that sadly, there's this reputation that it's somehow inferior to PWI, and it's not. It was the most transformative experience, the best facilities, the best professors that were invested in us, and the alumni that came back and invested in the next generation. It was a great experience to see both truly and the possibilities and how you can excel in both organizations.
Oh, I love that. When you think about what you had mentioned about your mom's role as an educator and her seeing that perhaps if the current school systems in which you were enrolled in didn't serve you all effectively, that just always providing opportunity. And then for you to also be able to see that at the collegiate level. I think it's helpful for folks, maybe if you can give a little context in terms of not just Alabama specific, but also I think writ large for those of our listeners who are outside of the United States. Like, what does this mean in terms of having these educational gaps? Because I think on the outside, people may have some semblance of an understanding around civil rights and the effort around desegregation, but what did that really mean for schools and school systems? And why is there a persistence of this gap in terms of quality education?
Yeah. This may be foreign to many folks, but here in the States, the school systems are largely funded by property taxes. It's not a leap to understand that poor communities collect less in property taxes, and then they tend to be funded less. And these tend to be the less desirable roles. So you get less experienced teachers that don't want to work in those communities. Frankly, it's a spiral. It means that in those formative years, young people are not getting the most engaged teachers who are invested in their success. In the state of Alabama, that means Black kids are suspended at a rate of every 15 minutes, more than twice the rate of white kids in the state. So there's clearly something going on. And that is, frankly, where the school to prison pipeline starts. Black folks and young kids are just not given the same opportunity to make mistakes as young people as we all do. That's the most obvious and transparent piece. What's really startling is in the state of Alabama and in my city, Birmingham, you can have the richest neighborhood in the state, Mountain Brook. This is like the Beverly Hills of Alabama. I grew up in a failed school system on the other side of the mountain, 5 minute ride away.
Wow.
And many of our communities outside of the city of Birmingham splintered off for that very reason. They wanted a segregated school system where they could invest in their kids and then leave the failing schooling system in the city. So it's really sad. It's unfortunate. I'm campaigning on very strong Department of Education standards that every single school system must meet and ensure that everyone gets a fair shot in education.
I suppose the complication would be for those who have means, there's then an extraction to put them into private schools, right? Because a lot of the reforms that I presume you and maybe others in other places across the country tend to advocate for focus on publicly funded schools. But
Yeah.
then private institutions don't necessarily have to adhere to some of those particular protocols unless they're getting certain kinds of subsidies from the state level. But
Mhm.
still, again, now that becomes a class or economic gap in that regard.
And we have a problem here in our state. We have a program that is basically giving $7,500 tax credits, not even tax deductions, tax credits for families to attend private schools. And again, that's taking young folks out of our school systems, taking our money, our tax dollars, and funding private institutions, not investing in the state. And I think that both can exist together, but we've got to find a way to ensure that we are funding our school systems and meeting those minimum standards, and then not just giving away money to people who would have been going to private school anyway. Some of these private schools are $30,000 a year. They're as much as colleges. These folks already have the money. They don't need the $7,500 our school systems do.
Now, you talked about your experience and your advocacy for HBCUs. And since we're still on the topic of education and education reform, you are correct. I've also heard the same as well around the fact that people question the quality of education that HBCUs offer, which I think is quite unfortunate, especially given the history as to why these institutions have historically benefited not just African American or African descended students from all over the world, but also other groups. You know, Howard University had Korean students in the late 1890s, right? Who knew?
Hmm.
These are institutions that have helped to educate people of color writ large. And yet, still, there's this unfortunate association that it's not up to par. So, therefore, you may hear, well, Howard University is the Harvard of the HBCUs, or Spelman College is the Yale of the HBCUs. And we don't necessarily need those qualifiers, but there is still that gap in terms of the same sort of awarding of prestige given to some of these schools.
Oh, for sure. The upsetting thing is, amazing as these institutions are, like over delivering Black professionals in medicine, in engineering, and veterinarians, in education, like my mother, they continue to face challenges in funding. It's like a toss up. Every administration, particularly Republican administrations, will we fund them? So, despite all of those challenges, they continue to over deliver. You brought up Yale. It's interesting. There would have been a almost 400-year-old historically Black institution founded basically next door to Yale if those folks had not chased them out of town a couple hundred years ago. So they have been up against the odds for hundreds of years and continue to outperform.
I wanted to come back to the question around just this sense of belonging. Education and finding your way and your footing as a student and learning is one aspect of belonging. But I'm wondering if there were certain kinds of experiences that influence your sense of belonging, your sense of self, and your own identity.
Definitely. This is what college is about. There's a big debate in our state here in Alabama about trade schools and college. They can all coexist, but college is a great time just to expand your mind. And I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness. I had a very close knit community, and it was basically church, proselytizing, school, and repeat. I did not get to see the rest of the world. In fact, even the word world has a very negative connotation in that Jehovah's Witness faith. So when I got to college, just 45 minutes away from my parents' house, I could experience the world. I could read and go to the library and get books that I never would have been able to bring home in Birmingham. And I remember distinctly walking through the kind of student center and seeing that there was going to be a meeting about LGBT historic people. And I was already starting to question my own sexuality. I went to that meeting and learned that Abraham Lincoln was very likely LGBT, and all of these different people and leaders who impacted our history. That was just amazing. Again, this was Alabama in the early 2000s. And similarly, in Washington, which was much more progressive, of course, was able to continue learning about my community, learning to kind of go from self-hatred and fear of who I was to acceptance.
Now, fast forward, you've built a corporate career at companies like L'Oreal and Whirlpool, Louis Vuitton, for example, and then spent over 20 years in nonprofit leadership where you've advocated for unhoused LGBTQ plus youth and pushed for solutions to the opioid crisis, among other issues. What lessons did entrepreneurship teach you about leadership and risk and resilience that you apply to your advocacy work today?
I think the clearest example is sitting down and identifying fraud in the books of one organization I served on the board of. That ability to get into the weeds when you need to, and then the ability to work at 10,000 feet when you also need to be strategic and oversee the vision of the organization. I brought all of those skills to the table in my 20 years of service, and being able to challenge folks even in fields where you're not the expert, but you can think strategically, have a bird's eye view of where you want to see that organization go. And finally, as a business leader, or my MBA from NYU, I think at a senior level, my role is not necessarily to do the hard work. It is to empower people to do that, give them the tools to create the pathway. And so that's what I've always tried to do in these organizations, building those relationships from the bottom to the top.
You see that also carrying over in terms of the work that you're doing and hopefully you winning the candidacy and ultimately the US Senate seat.
This is representing 5.25 million people in the state of Alabama. So, how do you ensure that everyone can rise up and be the best Alabamian they can be? That's what we did. We started reaching out to folks and asking them, what are the issues that are impacting you and your community? And it came back to kitchen table issues like education, healthcare, and the economy. So we started building out very specific plans and legislation that we can push to give everyone a fair shot.
What does service or servant leadership mean to you, and how has it guided your work, specifically in Birmingham, where legislators have passed some of the harshest LGBTQ plus as well as anti-Black policies?
I see it the same way I've seen it in my businesses and all of my forms of public service. It's clearing the obstacles, using your power for good. That is what is so frustrating when folks literally won't do anything for folks who need help. They see folks that need help. Rather than clearing the way, they create more barriers through this harsh legislation that you mentioned. Alabama happens to have the longest constitution, we say in the nation, but probably the world, millions of words. And it's this super conservative, super majority of Republicans that can just pass any law or constitutional amendment they want and keep folks down. Perfect example is what's happening with one of our public service commissions, where essentially they want to stay in bed with the Alabama Power Company, which is driving up our energy costs to the point that we're paying more than almost anybody in the nation. It doesn't make sense. And then I also think about our Waterworks Board, another utility, mass firing folks, very high credible claims of racial discrimination. These organizations are running wild, and our leaders are just allowing it to happen and encouraging it with their legislation. So, as a servant leader, I'm always going to be thinking about the people first. How do we ensure that we're empowering the people, giving them an opportunity, and doing right by them?
So I'm curious, what does that specifically look like? How do you empower people where they feel that we can actually effectuate the change that we need to see, experience it in our pocketbooks? It shouldn't be
Mhm.
a hardship to then decide, are we going to have lights on? Are we going to have food to eat or pay our prescription?
Those are literally the trade offs folks are making. For me, what that looks like is what I'm doing today. I was sitting at home calling donors, and I got the call that the 135 workers were mass fired, many by text, at one of our agencies. And I dropped everything and headed out to support the workers, attended a press conference there, and made sure that we were turning up the pressure and slowing this down, giving those workers the support they needed to lawyer up and fight for their rights. A lot of it really is education. We can't assume, frankly, that folks know what the next steps are. So we spend a lot of time in our social media walking people through the civics of where we're living right now, what we're going through, and the importance, for example, of when you elect a governor, guess what? That individual is going to get to appoint judges. And if you don't feel like you're being treated fairly in the court system, you actually have a way to influence that. Similarly, when we vote for the president, that individual gets to choose the Supreme Court. And we just saw they're debating things that shouldn't even be debated, like birthright citizenship. These all have ramifications. We start with educating folks about their civic power. Also, part of that education is helping them understand the power that leaders have and don't have. When we don't have control of the House, we don't have control of the Senate, A lot of the work that we have to do is, like you mentioned, protesting, working from the outside in. A lot of the work that I did in advocacy, but we've got to get leaders that are like-minded into office and then hold them accountable.
One of the interesting things that you've mentioned is just this notion around education and educating folks as to how does government work and what are my rights and what are things that I can advocate for on my behalf. It almost seems like in many ways, our education system nationally isn't really doing a great job educating folks around civics. I mean, growing up for myself, we had civics classes like you needed to pass civics and yeah, to understand and know like all the branches of government and what the different roles of people in these positions do. And it seems like people are getting their news only through TikTok and Facebook and YouTube, which oftentimes are not peer reviewed or well vetted in any way. And so you have a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of misinformation, just a lot of ignorance, right? Willfully or otherwise. And so it seems like that's a thread that folks like yourself, whether you're running for office or just trying to be boots on the ground and do advocacy work, are running up against. And I wonder, how can we circumvent that when you have also states, including Alabama, that's working towards being anti-woke?
Mhm.
So we can't even understand that people are having different experiences in the same country, and then people don't even know branches of government, and people don't know what the Supreme Court does or what happens or the implications around appointing a president.
Yeah, it's a real conundrum that we're in. And I distinctly remember my high school civics class, and it really was very inspirational to me, but I don't think that folks are getting that education anymore. And it starts with every office, it must be contested. So from the school board to the dog catcher, every single role has to be contested. And so these are the conversations I'm having with party leaders when I get the opportunity to sit down with them is how do we recruit candidates and start building a bench so that we're competitive in every single race and we can protect our students and ensure that they're getting the right opportunities to learn about civics. I just had sit down with a Birmingham Board of Education board member. So we've got to do this across the nation. And then we've got to think about how we communicate with the voters. So you mentioned some social media platforms. I think every single one you mentioned is owned by some right-wing billionaire at this point. So that's very concerning. As senator, I will be fighting for enforcement of the existing antitrust laws, and we've got to break up these businesses. It's very concerning when Paramount and CBS and all of these guys are owned by donors to Donald Trump.
The narrative is framed in a particular way, and then it's hard to have other kinds of perspectives and viewpoints enter into the discourse, right? And then
Right.
we can't contend with it if this is only one viewpoint, whether we agree or disagree, and it's very limiting. I mean, the same goes for healthcare reform as well, or even just economic reform, or even just thinking about international relations and our engagement with other countries around safety and security. We're framed in a way that's quite myopic and it's very narrow. It's reflective of whoever's in power. It doesn't really allow for much conversation or multi-partisan approaches to the analysis.
I agree. And I'm basically in a constant ongoing group chat with other candidates in the state. We all are just like, wow, we're being shadow banned on TikTok for speaking about Epstein. You mentioned at one time, and you can barely cross 100 views on your videos anymore. It's a very scary thing, and it's happening in real time.
I have to share something that's genuinely changed my sleep. I love my Cozy Earth bamboo sheets. They're unbelievably soft, breathable, and feel like luxury every single night. Treat yourself by using my 21% off discount code, which is belong to black at cozyearth.com. And know that we earn a commission when you use our code. So when you buy, you're also supporting the podcast. Find my discount code in the episode description and get luxurious sleep your body will appreciate. I know mine does. to the road. All right, Dakari, this is the part of the show I love asking my guests this question. And this question is, how do you play?
Wow. Gosh, food maybe. So,
As a person
yeah,
who likes to make, play in the food, or enjoy to eat
in
it.
variety, I would say in variety, trying different foods, but of course I have my mainstays. Yeah, I like to try lots of different things, different spices. Too busy to cook these days, but definitely can order. So, yeah, I would say food.
What's your favorite?
Gosh, cuisine, I would say French, which is interesting because a lot of that type of food is Southern, like confits and things like that.
Mhm.
It's been an amazing opportunity traveling the state and trying all of the different foods. Like just this week, I had Kaneka sausage. So that's very famous down south in Alabama. And it was a sausage with a coating of sugar on the outside. So imagine like candy, but then like sweet pork inside. So
Interesting.
yeah, so I'm trying to basically enjoy the signature dish of all of our 67 counties.
I love that because in many ways, culture is reflected in our food. So when you're trying all the different foods and delicacies across, you said 67 counties?
It's a lot of eating.
Yes, yes. So, but you're walking, right?
I'm walking a lot. And so my cousins actually cattle farm. They are getting ready to start slaughtering. We need to get our order in and imagine like the most delicious organic beef you could imagine. I mean, it's amazing. All over the state, we have so many great opportunities to eat.
I love that for you. I love food too. So I got to work out a little bit more, but
But yeah, so actually, I would say the combination of food and travel has been the most exciting part of this experience and just meeting people. I feel like, I've been out of the classroom formally. I graduated with my MBA in '09, so it's been a while. So I learned from these engagements. I sat down with my cousin earlier this week, and he's telling me about grain prices are up, diesel prices are up. He
Mm.
needs all of these different things to run his farm, and it's squeezing his margin. So now he has to increase the cost per pound for beef. So we're all feeling this, and just really being able to learn about these things from the ground up is amazing.
Your poignant memoir, Don't
Mm.
Flush, From a False Arrest to a Political Awakening, My Journey to Making a Difference, reflects on a significant moment in your life that has shaped your personal, your professional, and political priorities and vision for systemic change. And as I was reading your book, I couldn't help but to think about the names that were highly popularized during 2020, right? So
Mhm.
Philando Castile, Sandra Bland, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. Can you share what happened in Benton Harbor, Michigan on April 10th of 24 and how that false arrest became a turning point in your life as well as your political aspirations?
Yes, almost 2 years ago now, I was driving through the state of Michigan and was apprehended by the Michigan State Police, accused of all types of things that were false, including running red lights, driving under the influence of alcohol, smelling fruity, which I clearly believe was a homophobic slur. I was accused of driving under the influence of drugs. I was accused of drug trafficking by way of ingestion. I was forced to use the restroom publicly and told don't flush and was jailed. My driver's license was confiscated for many months. After thousands of dollars and hiring an attorney, I did receive the body and dash cam from that night and realized that the troopers were actually attempting to plant narcotics in my vehicle. That experience, that anger, led me to file an internal complaint. The police force did absolutely nothing, blew it off. We ultimately had to sue. I've been fighting for justice for years, and sadly, due to qualified immunity, the troopers remain fully employed. Our broken criminal justice system is continuing.
And for our listeners, what does it mean when the Michigan State Police were shielded by sovereign immunity and they were protected by qualified immunity.
Yeah. So it was intended, and I believe the original intention was appropriate to allow judges, police force, other government officials to do their job without fear of malicious lawsuits every single time they performed their functions. It's unfortunately been abused by the court system and by states that frankly want to protect their own pocketbooks. So now that this kind of qualified immunity has expanded and bills like HB 202, Back the Blue in Alabama, have started to roll out across the nation, and then the Back the Blue Act federally is under consideration again. Essentially, police forces and even folks who work in corrections are untouchable. And what does that mean? It means you can't even bring a suit without, in the state of Alabama, going to the Supreme Court. You have to prove very, very concretely that there was a constitutional violation before you can even make a complaint. There's a judge between you and even your opportunity to get in front of a jury of your peers. The standard by which it is that we can actually get a consideration of our matter has just risen to a level where it's impossible. When we finally got the decision of the appeals court about my matter about a month ago, my attorney was nearly in tears. She said, "This is not justice. This is not an accurate interpretation of the law." And she said, now it's flipped so much that the judges are attacking the victims, folks like me who were wrongfully arrested. And in my case, saying that I was suspicious for driving at 3 a.m., even though all tests proved that I was fully sober, not on any drugs, not even on medications, no evidence that I violated any traffic law, but I was suspicious for being out at 3 a.m. And everything else that happened to me, it's unfortunate, but too bad.
It's an incredible story. So many cases and so many instances, moments where police have abused their power. I loved your book. You were juxtaposing or likening it to your grandparents' experience and what it was like during Jim Crow being in Birmingham and in different ways, like your grandfather and his experience with the Klan and them being approached, or your grandmother driving with her other friends and being confronted by supremacists or Klan members on the street, concretizing those experiences in what was happening to you as you were kind of giving us the play by play. And then for me, I went on YouTube and I saw all the body cam video. I saw even the alleged traffic violation. And I just thought, why is it that the case, which drew national attention, mind you, was dismissed last year and the decisions around the appeal? I don't get it because it's very clear the ways in which they were targeting you, the ways in which the two officers on scene engaging with one another about, well, I guess what's next? Oh, you didn't do this. How they're asking you about the car and do you like the car and if the car is yours and all of the things, and then making fun of your name. And then, I mean, the list goes on and on to say, like, what is all this? And then still nothing was enough. You went to the hospital and even the prelims were like, there's nothing in his system.
Yeah, let's jail him anyway.
And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. Why can't they just release this man? Why not just, all right, you know what? Give me your ticket. You have your day in traffic court. You kind of figure it out. Did it become a sundown town? Like you can't be outside at 3 a.m.?
I learned this after the experience that it, in fact, used to be. Maybe it still is a sundown town. Yes, so it's a story town that has had race riots in the 90s and before. So it's a part of their culture. It's shocking. I've been asked many times before, this is your first office, first time running. Why didn't you go for city council? Why didn't you go for state senate? Whatever. I want to have a national dialogue around policing, accountability, and I'm campaigning for the end of qualified immunity federally. We've got to protect all motorists. I've authored federal legislation I call the Motorist Bill of Rights. And this is the moment. To my point, just 2, 3 days ago, the videos started to go viral again. So once I win this election, we're going to have a national discussion about this matter. We're going to win this in the court of public opinion, even though the judges are running interference and angling for their next promotion in Trump's court system, his judicial system. I see what they did there, but we're going to bring them to the court of public opinion.
I like to point out for our listeners that the arresting officer, one of them was also a Black man. Oftentimes, when we're thinking about disenfranchised, marginalized community, it's always us versus them and how they are treating us. But then, of course, there are circumstances when you have the officers that are also people of color that look like us. We would presume that there's a certain level of care that happens even when people are doing their job.
When he made himself apparent to me, he spent most of his time with my friend on the passenger side of the car. But when I saw him later in the night, I immediately felt some ease rush over me because I thought, one, there's a witness here, and two, he's a Black man. He's going to be more empathetic to what's happening. But what I learned, fast forward 5.5 months later, was that he was in the dash cam making fun of my name. It started with an animus and it proceeded the entire night. In fact, this is very interesting. During the actual incident, there was a brief moment when I got my phone and I got in the squad car and I started texting my friend. It's hard to see him in the video, but he's there sitting next to me in the passenger side. And I said, well, what were they asking you? So this is contemporaneous. It literally just happened well before we knew about the drug planning attempt. And he said, they were asking me, where did you get the car?
Mm.
And that was suspiciously scrubbed from the body cam.
Wow.
Yes. So it started with an animus, making fun of my name, saying that I smelled fruity. There's something fruity in here. Then it proceeded to not believing the car was mine. Then allegations that I was drug trafficking.
Hence the title of the book, Don't Flush, because they thought it was ingested and therefore
Yeah.
horrible. And I'm so sorry to hear that that was your experience. Such an injustice. You talk about the fact that you're running for US Senate, and that's not a small decision. Right. And so for folks that may or may not realize, Alabama's primary is coming up in November with your ambition to secure the Democratic nomination and ultimately the Senate seat. And there are a lot of folks who are running for this Democratic nomination as well. And you're in the top two contending for the seat. We're not going to name who that other person is. They don't need to give them any shine. So, how do all of these experiences from your childhood through now inform your platform?
It started with education. I wouldn't be speaking to you today if it were not for that investment in my education my mom made. And look, dad was in the army, mom was a teacher. We weren't rich, but we were rich in spirit. And I want everyone to get those opportunities from a quality education, kind of health care that we got, being part of a military family. Why can't everyone get those opportunities? When I graduated from University of Alabama, I couldn't find a job in the state. And like many folks, you have to choose to be underemployed here in Alabama or you leave. And we have this brain drain. So those are all the issues that I want to fix for this campaign. It's about lived experience, turning pain into purpose. It's interesting, when I moved back to Alabama in the midst of the pandemic, I did the same thing I did up north. I got involved in civics, volunteering, driving for Meals on Wheels. Won my first elected office, HOA president for development in downtown Birmingham. And in that experience, got to work with the mayor's office, city council, Department of Buildings. So I've been taking all of this experience together to build a platform that can win, that works for all Alabamians.
I'm curious to find out from you. Primaries are always challenging for candidates running. Let's say there are folks who are perhaps on the fence about whether they should go and participate in the primary, or maybe on the fence about you. Are there two or three things that you would love for folks to know about you who are listening, who are in Alabama right now? If you could speak to them and ask them, or make a compelling case, what would you say about your candidacy and why they should vote for you?
Well, it's May 19th. That is the primary in Alabama. And you're right, it is difficult sometimes for people to find the time, and we've got to make voting easier for people.
Oh, I stand corrected. It's not November?
That'll be the general.
See,
Yes.
I'm rushing ahead.
We got to win May 19th first. We've got to make voting easier. You're right. In fact, they planned originally to have the primary on May 26th, which is basically Memorial Day. People are traveling, they're not thinking about voting. So we were able to pull it back to May 19th. And why should you vote? Your voice matters. It matters. Just the other week, I was at an event and someone said they won their election by 5 votes. He said, imagine one SUV made the difference in winning that nomination. If you want to think about how much your vote matters, think about the primaries. So in Alabama, in the Democratic side where I'm running as a Democrat, we're lucky if 200,000 people show up for a primary for a state that's 5.25 million people. So you have an outsized opportunity to make a decision around who's going to represent you in November. So take that opportunity. It's really an honor and it's free. In
Right.
terms of my policy proposals, look at what I've done and extrapolate that to the future. You can see me out there fighting for labor, fighting for access to education, building companies, and creating opportunities. I'm going to do the exact same thing, but on steroids with the authority of the United States Senate behind me. My aspiration is to continue elevating all Alabamians, giving them a platform through listening. And that's what I've done for the last year is traveling the state, listening to folks, creating policies that work for them, and a real glide path to getting there for all of us through education, healthcare, and the economy.
Act 3, Where We Land. All right, Dakarai Larriett, I would love for you to share with our listeners a little bit more about where they can find you. If you have a particular website, please do share that. And if there are any upcoming events, tours, showcases, anything that you are doing as part of your campaign, but then also part of a lot of the work that you're doing otherwise, please do share.
Well, the best way to reach me is on social media. So, Dakarai Larriett, it's the weirdest name that's going to be on the ballot. You'll find me very easily. So, Dakarai Larriett for Senate on all platforms. And then my website is dakarailarriett.com. And we would love for you to click Get Involved so you can find ways to volunteer on the campaign. Phone banking is a great way to get involved. And if you're able to donate, that allows us to get our name out throughout the state, whether that's radio ads, billboards, you name it. And if you want to see what we're doing, click on events. It's a first link on our website. And then you'll see my public calendar, and I'm bouncing all over the state. Every single day, I'm in a different county. So we have 67 to get to. I'm all over the place, new county every day. So thank you so much for engaging with us.
Best of luck, best wishes on the remaining time left on your primary campaign for U.S. Senate. And we appreciate you for joining us here on Belonging to Blackness.
Oh, thank you so much. I so appreciate it, Dr. India.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others and be sure to subscribe. Find us on my website, www.indialoricwilmot.com. Follow us on IG and Facebook at belongingtoblackness_podcast for the latest fashion and accessories. Visit www.shopbelongingtoblackness.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.